Hello and welcome. A familiar theme tune, but not a week in review, but a year in review. From January to December, it's been a year to remember for most, for good and for bad. And to review some of the big news stories from the year, I have two esteemed colleagues with me. To my right, I have Ali Sise. Ali, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And to my left, I have Mr. Momodu Mboj. Mr. Mboj, as ever, welcome.
Cheers. Thank you.
And for viewers who, year in review, you might be watching this for the first time, we have several stories to go through, but we can't play you videos from all of them, but we'll play from some of them, and we will also discuss all of the stories. Having said that, we covered over 500 stories in the year, and we can't possibly go through all of them. But I mentioned at the start that it's been a momentous year, a year of elections, a year of the TRRC concluding and presenting its report. A year of a former minister being sentenced to death. Very, very many things. And of course, for sports-loving fans, decent performance at the Olympics, but to crown it all, of course, Gambia qualifying for the AFCON for the first time. So a longer than usual program, but nonetheless, a lot of stories to get into. So let's get cracking, shall we? The first one, there were disputes and arguments about whether the election would go ahead because the voter registration had been postponed. But then we had some reassuring words from His Excellency, the President. Have a look, have a listen.
In his address at a well-attended rally in Iwo Town, President Barrow said his government will not compromise the election and the dictates of the Constitution. Gambians will head to the polls on 4 December to elect their next president. He describes the election as an important one for Gambians to either vote for his government for continued development, democracy and peace, or otherwise. He reaffirmed his respect for the Constitution, saying he wouldn't embark on such a tour during the pandemic, if not for the fact that it is provided for in the Constitution. On governance, he said there are an independent and functional judiciary and National Assembly.
Election bi num mundi mel on the 4th of December dinañ def election bir Gambia fi ñun affaire election duñ ko fayanto affaire constitution ñun duñ ko fayanto constitution bi lu war fa ñu def lolu.
Ali, you were there. We heard His Excellency the President saying categorically that the elections would go ahead. What was the sense? What was the mood there? Because there had been rumors that because voter registration had been delayed, that the elections might be delayed.
Yeah, because what happened actually, this statement was made earlier in January of this year, when actually the Independent Electoral Commission was meant to commence the voter registration maybe a week later on the 14th of January. And because of some procurement issues regarding the GPPA, it was put on halt as some logistics were needed to be put in place, which had really affected the Independent Electoral Commission. And because, I mean, there was news from the IEC that, you know, the planned registration has been put on hold. It sparked so much doubts and questions from politicians and even some members of the CSOs who were doubting as to why the IEC decided to, to postpone the voting exercise.
Mr. Mboj, we're both smiling at that because I think we discussed this at the time, and we said that we live in a world where there's so much suspicion that even when the President said that they would go ahead, people were saying, no, he'll conjure up something to make sure it doesn't go ahead. But of course, he was as good as his word, and everything went ahead as planned.
Absolutely, and yes, he was categorical, but we also know that there were a number of sort of X factors really dependent on with the COVID, what was going on.
Indeed.
So much had been changed, as it were, in the year because of the COVID and all the rest of it. But we knew that, we had discussed it here. We said, there was really nothing that the IEC or the chairman himself had done for anybody to doubt his integrity at all. So we decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, as it were, here on the weekend review. So we did. That was it.
And as you said, the elections went ahead. Now, another big story from January was cocaine seizure. And we'd heard, we hear about cocaine seizures all the time. Mr. Mboj, again, one that we discussed. This one was the biggest ever. and that's why it was news. I think you were a bit skeptical because I think along the lines that we hear about these seizures and then nothing.
Yes.
We don't hear about prosecutions, we don't hear about jail sentences. What were your views on that?
Absolutely. Well, I more or less hold on to the same view generally, because what we were told that the seizure had a street value of what me around 87 million.
That's right.
And then we knew that it had come from Ecuador.
Yes.
And then there was a French person, a French passport holder who was part of it, and there was a manhunt for that.
That's right.
I'm not sure whether I heard anything else about that manhunt.
Did you hear anything else?
That has to do with the issue of Banta Keita, who we understand is on the run and they're still looking out for him. I mean, there is no development as at now as to whether he's been arrested or not. Perhaps he's still hiding somewhere else. But I think for me, the fact that they were able to intercept such a huge cocaine for me was a great achievement by the person at the seaport.
Sure. No, thanks for that. Thank you. And as I said, lots of stories to get through. Another big story in January was, of course, the TRRC was continuing, and we heard from the Usman Sow, former, head of the now defunct NIA. Aliyu, and he actually gave evidence over 2 days. And, again, I made a joke at the time, one of these I don't remember type things. I mean, you remembered his testimony. What were your views when you heard the testimony?
Yes, I mean, because if you look at the TRRC, you will realize that the SIS, then used to be called NIA, was the center of this TRRC, because it was seen as a place where so many tortures had occurred, and then they believe it was very crucial as far as gathering the evidence needed to substantiate any claims that have been made against the former regime is concerned.
Sure.
And because of that, we've seen at some point, I mean, he was even alleged to have, tampered with some of the evidence at the NIA. So his testimony was very important as to how the place was being used as a torture center, but in terms of operation, how were they carrying out their work as an intelligence unit of this country.
Mr. Mbo, did you get a sense from his testimony that we got to learn how they worked?
Kind of, even though he tried to hide in all
many of them
ways.
did.
And many of them trying to do that.
Sure.
And it was quite curious that certain people had placed him actually in the very torture rooms. That's one. And then the repainting of certain rooms.
That's
he
right.
certainly did certain things that one can possibly interpret as tampering with the evidence. So for me now it will be interesting to see what would the TRRC recommend at him? What would it say in his situation?
We have seen some part of the recommendation where it has recommended that he should be banned from holding public office for something like 10 years. I mean, but we also saw when the TRRC visited the NI headquarters, he was there, and he strongly denied that he did that to tamper with evidence. Perhaps for him, he was doing it to transform the place, because
which is what he said.
Exactly, he was trying to transform the place.
There's more refurbishment rather than trying to disguise anything.
But still an intelligence person, perhaps I should have thought that because of the investigations that we promised the Gambia that we're going to do, the evidential value, given the position, given his experience, maybe.
Quite. There you are. And another story in January, of course, was the first UK variant of COVID appeared in the Gambia. Mr. Mboj, every time there's a variant, we panic.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, we've gotten off fairly lightly, have we not?
Yes, and generally in Africa, we have to say that. I mean, by then when the variant came, we had, about 3,000 or so of confirmed cases and about 126 deaths. But a bit has happened since then. With hindsight, we know that now it's about 10,000 and some 300 or so, 342 deaths. So this is the whole of Africa. We do not really quite know yet.
Sure.
There are so many theories and hypotheses. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe afterwards we will collate all the data,
then
we'll try to really pinpoint what has been the case. But generally, it has been it.
Ali, which takes me on to the next one. Or did you want to comment on that?
No, you can.
The next one, it leads actually the next story. We made this very ambitious target that we wanted to vaccinate 70%. It was quite a bold, quite an ambitious one, particularly when we kept hearing about vaccine hesitancy. I mean, what was your view about that?
Yeah, for me, like any other person, I mean, what happened? I mean, when there was this announcement of this COVID-19 back in 2020, you know, Gambia will get our first case in March of that year, and because of that, I mean, there was so much panic and fear, and the people were so optimistic about having this vaccine. But along the line, we've seen, I mean, there was a change of heart and mind. Some people, for some reason, had their reservation as far as this vaccine is concerned. The government, through the Minister of Health, we are also very concerned, you know, in order to get this vaccine to be able to protect, I mean, the people, even though at some point we saw, I mean, the hesitancy was there. People, for some reason, had their own reservation and didn't want to get the vaccine. But for me, it was a good idea that, you know, at least the government had made that effort to the Ministry of Health to get this vaccine in the country. And, you know, like you said, in the story, it was really important for the fact that, you know, we even applied to be part of the Global Alliance for the Vaccine Initiative.
Yeah, thank you for that. And really, one of the big stories from the National Assembly early in the year was the National Assembly members had gone for this loan, 54.4 million, and the courts threw it out, saying that, and we'll discuss it later, but really this was kind of the initial, when it was agreed. And there was shock, and there was comment, Mr. Mboj, when it was agreed.
Even though it was a slim majority, I think 17 to 16 to pass that. But it was quite, I'm curious.
Sure.
I'm not sure, was it that they didn't know the law?
Because initially, as soon as it was announced, there was a challenge to it. And later in the program, we'll find out what happened with that challenge. But straight away, it was challenged.
It was challenged.
You know,
absolutely. Those people knew what they were talking about.
Well, this is it. And the National Assembly members, because the ones who were in support of it were quite strong in advocating that it should go ahead.
Absolutely. And then what do you have? How would people think about that? How would we interpret it? Oh, look at them again.
Well,
Pigs in the trough.
Well, this is it. Yeah. So those stories bring us to the end of January. And in February, the much rumoured announcement was finally made flesh. The party had been launched, but this time the president officially launched his National People's Party. Have a look.
This new party, the NPP, represents the present and the future. And it is here for all Gambian citizens within the framework of a new political consciousness and a new direction. It is the party for all categories of people, based on the concept of true democratic and patriotic Gambian citizenship.
There you are. As I said, the president launched Aliu again. I say much rumoured. He'd already registered the party, but this was the big launch, and it was quite an affair, wasn't it?
Indeed, it was for the fact that, like you said, I mean, there were rumours as to whether the president was going to form his own party or not. I mean, and then this actually culminated what has been months of preparation by party supporters to make sure that, you know, they're able to have that historic launching of the National People's Party, because it was important for the president. I mean, we knew that at the you know, he came to power, you know, through a coalition coming from the UDP party and forming his own party. This was something that his party militants has really prepared for, to ensure they have that historic occasion to launch their party as they prepared at the time for the December election.
And Mr. Mboj, I think you were one of those who, when it was first rumoured, I think you made the very good suggestion that he might call it the National Development Party. Because you know, he'd been the plan. I thought he mixed a trick there by not doing so. But as Aliu rightly says, you know, it'd been rumoured, and suddenly finally it happened, and then the big launch, and it was quite a huge affair, wasn't it?
Of course, once we had that rupture.
Sure. Between him
the
and
president and UDP, you know, even he had to resign.
It was inevitable.
But still, Barrow is our Barrow.
We all remember that.
So once we had the rupture, we knew that the likelihood of the president forming his own party was very, very high.
Sure, indeed.
So in many ways, no surprise.
And so it happened, and so that was in February. And also in February, Ba Tambedu, former Attorney General, was nominated for the Nobel Prize, and again, something that most Gambians felt very proud.
Yeah, indeed, for any genuine Gambian, I mean, those are moments that you always feel proud as a Gambian. Seeing, you know, somebody from the country, a minister, being nominated for such global recognition is something that is worth celebrating. And then for me, as a Gambian, as a journalist, it's always a proud moment, because, like you said, these are things that always sell the image of the country, and also show the world that there's a country called the Gambia.
And of course, the case against Myanmar. He very much led that, and very much that thrust him into the international spotlight.
Absolutely unbelievable. You were looking at the papers around the world. Everybody was like,
Little Gambia.
How brazen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But fantastic man in many ways. Yes, the ICG, but before that, Rwanda. Where was it? He was doing similar stuff in Eastern Africa.
Well, that's right, in East Africa.
He was in East
right,
Africa.
yes.
So that's it overall, even here with the TRRC. He was so instrumental in it. So fantastic for certain people to consider him for nomination. That in itself was quite an honor. In the end, I think Maria Risa and the Russian won it.
That's right. That's right. And we all felt disappointed.
We all felt disappointed, but
yes,
fantastic. Really.
And another quite a different story from February was when Gambian UK-based scientist shared his story of being involved in his former dropout, or thought he was going to be a dropout, and then he turned out to be a scientist at one of the leading universities.
Absolutely. A fantastic story. From school, MRC, then Westminster University in London, Westminster College, in biomedical sciences, and then suddenly to the Jannah Institute, University of Oxford, and being part of this really huge, significant. Is there anything more significant in our age
than
the search for working on COVID and being involved in that?
In finding the vaccine.
Yeah, I think for me that has also helped in trying to portray the image of this country. Like Mr. Ade will say, nothing is impossible, and it's just about pursuing your dreams, and that's exactly what we have seen in this case. Somebody from the smallest country in Africa, going to the West, for his education, and coming out to be part of the team that will help in trying to find a lasting solution to this global pandemic. For me, it was quite incredible. It
really was. And our final story from February, one that I think the public took to heart. Various Open Society for the Gambia decided to go on a voter sensitization, telling people it's important to vote. They really took that on board. Look at the numbers that registered and the numbers that voted.
Absolutely. Well done. Bravo.
I don't know whether they can take the credit for it, but at least they've been part of it. They've been part of it. Of an effort.
And in the end, what? 89%?
That's right, 88%. And in some constituencies, 94 and 95% in some constituencies. So it's quite. People came out to vote, and as we said, we joke about Open Society being, but many other people tried to inspire people to say, go out and vote, and certainly they did.
And for me, that was quite significant. He's someone who has been always, very much concerned about that, trying to say, it's important that people must go out and vote. Because this, you're right. You really need to go out there and participate in choosing who leads your country. And it was important that we have the the Open Society Forum, and together with other stakeholders, all coming out to tell Gambians, what, it is important. You need to go out there and vote on the 4th of December, and that has really been translated into the percentage we have seen, like 89%. It's not a small number.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for that. And as I said, lots of stories to get through. And on to our third video, and this time it was to do with a former junta member, Yankuba Toure, who had applied for immunity. Well, what did the court have to think about that? Have a look.
The judges also recognized the fact that Yankuba is a former member of the AFCON, which seized power in 1994. His alleged murder of Usman Gorosise, for which he is claiming immunity against prosecution, has no connection to official duties. It is therefore not surprising, as mentioned in the judgment, that the accused and his lawyer failed to canvass this point in their submissions. Having established that point, the court observes that by no stretch of the imagination can the alleged killing of Usman Gorosise by allegedly bludgeoning him to death with a pestle be said to have been carried out by the accused in the performance of his official duties.
He had relied rather brazenly. One of the more dramatic appearances initially at the TRRC, which of course eventually led him to the Supreme Court, Aliu, and the Supreme Court was categoric in rejecting his immunity.
Yes, I think for some people they was okay. Maybe he was misinformed. Perhaps he relied on something that was untenable at the time. Perhaps he has some people who advise him as far as the legality of his decision was concerned. But I mean, for many people, you spotting that they were like, if I was Yankuba, I would have just testified and say what I knew about all what has happened. But perhaps he was also convinced at the time that he has a ground because of the immunity he was talking about. But I mean, we have seen, I mean, at some point, even the Justice Minister then Tambedo, trying to challenge him that if you want to challenge the power, then they're to throw the book at him, and that, we have seen that really affected him as a former minister, and he's now in jail.
Indeed, Mr. Mboj, when the court was reciting and going through the judgment, the presiding judge said something quite significant and dramatic. He said, beating somebody to death with a pestle cannot in any circumstance count as something you did in the normal course of your duties.
Absolutely.
Which would have given him immunity, but of course that certainly could not.
Absolutely, and so was watching this spectacle, this horrid spectacle. I mean, we had other senior members of the junta.
Sure.
Nobody invoked it.
Well, that's right.
He was the only one who really invoked it.
Yes.
Why? But again, we've heard in the beginning people like Kante and others telling us about Yankuba. He was the comedian. He was this. He wanted to turn that.
That's right.
Our TRRC into that, with all his antics and all the rest of it. So he's just paying for the price. This was really the sort of disdain that he wanted to show. He showed actually to the TRRC. Well, this is the price we get. We've already started our prosecutions, actually.
Well, this is it. So yes, I mean that was one that certainly resonated with a lot of people. And something else that happened in March was when you had an incident in Sanyang where somebody had been killed. And members of the Senegalese community had to go into hiding, had to be protected. And this kind of showed some of the kind of fragility of some of these. We always say, smiling coast and all this. But in some communities, there's quite a kind of fragile relation between the ones who were not Gambians and the Gambians.
And for me, it was quite unfortunate. I mean, like you said, Gambia is known to be the smiling coast. I mean, we are known to be very welcoming. And then when that incident happened, and knowing the people who were really involved, these are people who are our close-door neighbors. And then, we share a lot in common as far as Gambia and Senegal is concerned. But then that was an incident which was very unfortunate. And then the aftermath of that, I mean, is something that I believe, we will all learn something from it moving forward. And then we saw the government also, trying to intervene, trying to visit them, trying to give them some sort of support, just to, reassure them that they are safe in this country.
Mr. Mboj, we talk about, the Senegal as being siblings, but there's sibling rivalry, and sometimes it can be quite intense. And this was a kind of example of that, surely.
Absolutely. Politicians, policymakers, you should always think about that. How many times have we said it? This Pan-Africanism, we have all these terms, as it were. But again, when certain social issues happen, for instance, what happened there, somebody being killed, then differences will emerge. Or sometimes when you have this economic, when people are in economic hardship,
that's right.
then suddenly you realize that you do not belong after all. So we must realize what are the conditions to make peaceful coexistence to really happen here. Then we will help. Government, CSOs, everybody else will help. But there's always this tendency, this latent tendency to have these social divisions when they are triggered.
When they're triggered, as you say. And also in March, the announcement that everybody had been waiting for, the dates of the voter registration were finally announced. And we all breathed a sigh of relief and thought, oh my gosh, yes, this is going to go ahead. Aliu, you went out and registered. And
for me, it was something that was a good move by the IEC, knowing the fact that the initial date for the registration, January, was postponed due to what we discussed earlier on. And then finally having it, confirmed to commence on the 29th of May during the year. I mean, it was something that was reassuring, and it further, reinforced the president's statement that, no matter what, election must hold on 4 December. And it was good that it happened successfully, and then, all those who wanted to vote really, got registered.
Sure, and thanks for that. As we said, people got registered, and in the end, it went smoothly, relatively.
Absolutely, and we were expecting what, just over 1 million.
That's right.
1.1, 1.2, something like that. In the end, 962,000 came, which is not bad at all. So this is successful.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then, of course, for sports lovers, this was the moment. Gambia finally qualified, the last West African country to do so. To do what? To qualify for AFCON. Everybody was excited, including His Excellency the President. Have a look.
I'm on holidays in Mankamakunda, but I was following the match online. I think everybody is happy. Exactly the same with me and my family. We are all very, very happy. But I will seize this opportunity to thank the team, the captain, the coach, the management, and the entire GFA and the Gambian people. This is a great day in the history of this country. I think we waited so long, and I'm a big football fan. I have been following football since in the 70s. Where we have the Biri, the Laos, you understand, the Keba Dias and the others. But we tried and tried and tried. We were not able to succeed in qualifying for the African Cup of Nations. But this is the first time we are qualifying for African Cup of Nations. I think this is great, and this is big in the history of this country. We will never forget this day.
Just fading out the president there, but I think we got the joy. Ali, you were the one who spoke to him on that occasion. He was as excited as all of us.
Exactly, and I remember you were also here with me on that particular day. Quite historic day for the country, really quite memorable day. I remember that evening. It was great atmosphere across the country. You know, seeing the country qualifying to its maiden AFCON for the first time in the history of this country was something that all of us were excited. Journalists, politicians, everybody was excited at that on that day.
Mr. Mboj, I mean, I hadn't long been in the Gambia, but I was quite surprised at how emotional I felt. Let alone for football-loving Gambians like yourself.
We were like in a sort of lonely basket, as it were, the last West African country to qualify.
That's right.
For AFCON.
For AFCON, yeah.
So of course we were all chuffed. We were all over the moon.
Yeah.
Really. So now, what are we going to do once we get there?
Well, this is it, and I've been discussing this with Aliu and others, and I've said, it's remarkable that both Madagascar and Cape Verde, when they went to the first. As little countries for the first time, both of them in their first appearance got to the quarterfinals. Yeah. So Gambia can dream. I mean, surely, and Ali, we have to dream big.
Definitely. I mean, if Madagascar and Cape Verde can go out there and prove themselves, why not Gambia? Yeah. We are going there. I think the most important thing is the teams should go there and prove that, we deserve to be here. We are here to compete. We are not just here to be part of it. We want to compete and, win the tournament.
And so go there with belief.
Exactly.
I mean, Ethiopia, as we speak, have already landed in Cameroon way above everybody else. Yeah. And the coach, when he was asked, said, aren't you being a bit hasty? He said, we haven't come for a holiday. He said, we've come to prepare. And they're one of the unfancied team, and yet they're thinking big. Yeah. And we also have to think big.
Exactly. It's important. It's very important.
We all know that winning is perhaps 50% psychology. It's really in your head.
Absolutely.
You know what we say about the Germans.
Yes,
it doesn't matter how the odds are against them. Still, in their heads, we can win.
We can win this.
Once you have that,
it's all about self-belief, like Mr. Ade.
Sure. And so, we wish the Scorpions all the best, and later on we'll talk about the draw as to whether it's been kind or not. We will discuss that. But that brings us to the end of March and then into April, and this again we talk about AFCON making us proud as Gambians. There was something else that made us very, very proud as Gambians, and that was to do in the medical field. Have a look at this.
He led a team of young doctors who performed the country's first ever successful knee replacement surgery on Saturday. His widely reported and symbolic achievement has earned him respect and admiration from Gambians at home and abroad. The soft-spoken doctor says the public reaction came as a big surprise to him and his team, and thanked Gambians for their show of support.
To be honest, we weren't expecting this reaction after doing it. We do a lot of surgeries here. It's not often that they catch the attention. So I think one of the best things about this is that people are getting more attention to the work that we are doing here. So this operation was what we call a knee replacement. It's what we do for people who have very bad arthritis, when the joint is very worn out and the bones are rubbing together, causing a lot of pain. So the main reason for doing the operation is to relieve pain and also improve the movement in the joint so that people can walk again and they don't have much pain.
He said the reaction was a big surprise to him and his team. But Mr. Mboj, you and I, we discussed this with Choi and others, and with Esonyasi, who did that story. We were quite proud, amongst other things, because we're so used to hearing of Gambians having to go outside of the country for this sort of surgery, and yet here it was being done here at home.
Absolutely. I once interviewed him on The Viewpoint. I was really privileged that I interviewed this young man. I mean, from a top university in Britain. Could have been anywhere in the world, really, but decided to come back home. And over there as well, you had others, people like Dr. Roberts. So fantastic. This is really what we want. Instead of the brain drain, people going out, we want people to come back in. For us, it's not really about the talent. We have a lot of talented people outside. It's just a matter of coming back in, and all these different sectors, we can be giving our citizens first-class services.
And for me, it was a good thing. It was historic having our own Gambian, doing this thing. In most cases, like Mr. Ade said, we mostly rely on medical attention outside the country. Many times you hear people asking for support to travel outside the country to undergo such medical treatment. But if we have our own Gambian who can do this thing, then I don't think we will have that financial difficulties of traveling outside the country to undergo such medical treatment. And I think this will also inspire other medical personnel in this country who want to be like doctor.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because the reason we always feature stories like this is for the inspirational value. Gambians watching this can say, we can do this too. It's not just we can't always be sending people to Ghana, to Dakar, to wherever. We can do it, and somebody who's training to be a surgeon, who's Gambian, can say, oh, Dr. Marina and his team did it, I can do it, and I can do even better than them. And that's the value of it, surely.
Absolutely. This is the value of having these sort of role models. They become that. They never choose it, but we turn them into role models. So this is the value. You can have a 5-year-old, 10-year-old who is sort of like, perhaps fascinated by all of these things, and in his own head, oh, I want to be a doctor.
That's
in her own head, you know what I mean? I want to be a doctor. So you just never know how deep, how far these things can reach in a society.
And I think it was good that, we carried this story. I mean, like Mr. Ade said, the purpose is not just to show what happened, but also to inspire other people that, we have Gambians who can do this thing, and certainly, you can also do it like him.
Absolutely. And, we say, big congratulations again to the doctor and his team. And as he was, at pains to stress, I didn't do it alone. I did it as part of a team. And so, big up to him. And he's somebody I follow on Twitter as well.
He's very active on Twitter.
He really is. And onto a completely different story, and one that did not come to pass. We heard, said with some authority that the diaspora will vote in 2021. Aliyu, it didn't quite happen, did it?
It didn't happen. I mean, it was something that the diaspora had really anticipated. Most of them, they were so excited that they were going to vote. I mean, from wherever they are based outside the country. But then, I mean, it couldn't happen due to some reason which the government said was beyond its control. But then, I mean, it's something that is important, even though we have seen so many, diaspora Gambians living outside coming back home to register just to take part in this election. Because like you said, I mean, this election was quite very important for Gambians, not only those within the country, but even outside the country. But then the issue of not having the diaspora voting is something that I hope to see happen in the next election.
And we know how important the diaspora in so many instances. But Mr. Mboj, I have to be honest and upfront about this. From the get-go, I said it would never happen.
I remember.
Because I just felt the logistics and the resources was simply not there for it to happen, and so it proved to be.
That was exactly what we essentially, that was the consensus. We said that yes, but again, that will lead me to ask. I mean, really, did the IEC have a proper appraisal of the situation? And they were sure, certain in their heads, that it will go ahead. Otherwise, I'm wondering why did they say that? Why did they say that? So categorical. So that judgment there, it seems to be quite interesting. Because some of us, we looked at the practicalities on the ground. We knew that, no, it's not going to happen. Maybe the elections after that, granted, but never this one, never 2021.
Well, that's right. And as you said there, I mean, they went around, and they seemed to be, the kind of framework that could have been built upon, because when they had the draft constitution and they took that around the world, they met diaspora communities and they got their views on various things, including on voting rights, which would have been in the new constitution had it gone ahead. And yet, you know, I just didn't see any moves being made to make it happen. And so when it was said quite categorically that it was going to happen, I thought, how?
That's it. And there were no moves being made. That's precisely it.
Yeah,
so this is it. Would you demarcate them into constituencies? How?
Sure.
You know? Yeah. So there was no talk of that at all. There was nothing on that. And you just said that they'll vote in 2021. You were like, I'm not sure about that.
And you know, sadly, it came to pass. Something else that happened in April, African descendants who, lots of people come to the Gambia, and in recent times, because of things happening in the West, we've seen people who are of African descent wanting to come to Africa generally, including of course here in the Gambia. And of course you had COAD, the Council of African Descendants, had this forum at which I spoke, and others including Halifa Sallah spoke brilliantly, saying, you know, they wanted to come back, and you know, it's still being discussed, even though they've had some support from National Assembly members to be given citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's important. I mean, seeing people of this category, you know, thinking of coming back to Africa. I mean, to give back to society. I mean, at some point, I remember, was it 2 years ago, we saw a huge number coming back to Ghana, where they were even given, you know, passports and all that. Exactly. 2019,
year of return.
Exactly. So I think this is quite very important. I don't know what the law says about people who want to come back under these circumstances, Mr. Mbocha, Mr. Adeb. But for me, it is quite important, and it is worth supporting by any government.
But we have to be honest, it wasn't universally welcomed, even in the office.
Exactly.
I heard people saying, I don't think this should happen. Mr. Mbocha, what your own views on that?
Remember, when we discussed it, I was more for it.
Yes.
So it was just a matter of a question of how do you carry people with you?
Sure.
Would it be, and perhaps you may have certain compromises in how you allow them in.
Sure.
Would it be quotas? In what manner?
Sure.
So it's essentially the manner in which you would do it.
Yes.
But the principle itself, I laud the principle, but just let's carry the people with you politically. That's what you do. And earlier on we were just talking about when you have different groups within the country, and then something triggers, and then suddenly, oh, we are not brothers or sisters anymore. That is why you have to carry the people.
And if anybody from the Gambia government is watching, and I say this not to scare anybody off, but in the last 2 or 3 weeks in Sierra Leone, where a whole range of people of African descent have been given citizenship, it hasn't been welcomed by many Sierra Leoneans. If you go on social media groups, they're very critical of it, saying these people, just because they're black, you're giving them full citizenship rights, when, you know, there are others who don't have those rights in the country. I have to say, some of the people opposing it, you know, just saying, you know, why are you doing this, you know, without any kind of basis for it. So it's not exactly as if everybody's going to be welcoming, is it?
I mean, we don't also expect everyone to support the idea of having them come back, but for me, you have to look at the impact. What impact, you know, most of them are over there, they're well settled there. They can come back and invest in the development of the country. But it depends on how people see it. People have their different opinions as to some of these issues. But then for me, I think it is worth considering by any government.
Yes, and then the deeper values, the Pan-Africanism, you have
this
that.
Is it. Yes.
And we've also inherited a world in which blackness is almost like a nation.
Yes.
It's an extraordinary.
It is.
So we must be quite sensitive to these realities of our age, and really.
And I think the president, when he met them, quoted Peter Tosh.
Exactly.
No matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African.
And
I guess that says it all, really.
Absolutely. I mean, you find in Europe, most Europeans, you know, white people, we see Europe as the ancestral home. You see in Israel, the Jews were from wherever. You can go back there as your ancestral home.
That's right.
I think in Africa we should be able to do that.
I think so. I agree with you both on that one. And another story, our final story from April, was again a positive for Gambia. Gambia eliminates trachoma, something that, you know, has traumatized us for generations, really. and yet finally we could say we've eliminated it from the country.
Absolutely, and I understand that perhaps when you go back to 1959, about 65.7% of the children.
Yeah.
So the journey, you know, sometimes you try to put some of these things into kids, telling them that if you take a long time frame, things have been improving. Be careful in how you judge your society. You know, don't be too harsh a critic of your society, really. So be careful. So absolutely, when we eliminated it, I think the second country in Africa.
That's right.
In Ghana, 2018.
That's right.
Absolutely, yes.
That's right.
Yes.
I think for me it's a good thing, but now what remains to be seen, how are we going to build on this thing? It's one thing to achieve this, but how do we build on this achievement?
Because it's always the danger that we become complacent, isn't it?
Exactly, because we've achieved it, we celebrate, and then we are carried away by that, and then we tend to forget that, you know, there's still a lot that needs to be done. And I hope, you know, we will build on this achievement so that, you know, we remain there.
Yes, let's hope so. And that takes us into May and our sixth video that we're going to see, and this one something that again was broadly welcomed. It's finally happened. What has finally happened? The national languages will be included in the curriculum at university level. Yes, honestly, have a look.
The UTG's acting Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academics, Professor Per Gomez, who came up with the initiative, explains its significance.
Imagine having to teach Mandinka 101, Mandinka 102. The students now have the liberty. Either they choose French or Arabic or Spanish or Mandinka or Fula or so on. But the way we're operating, we're imposing these foreign languages and denying them the possibility of learning their own language. Now we give them that liberty, that freedom.
Pierre Gomez was about to say to our colleague Choi there that, you know, we're being unfair to our students. They come here, they learn French, they can learn German, Spanish, and whatever else, but not Mandinka, Wolof, etc. What are your thoughts on that, learning it at university level?
Yeah, for me, it's important to learn it at the university, but I would suggest for them to start it from the, you know, tender age, from the primary school, you know, growing up to the university. I think there, you know, you will be able to, you know, capture it well. For me, that's my idea. It's a good thing to introduce at the university, but I would suggest, you know, they started from the tender age, from the primary school. Mr. Mboch.
Mr. Boyd, before you jump in, one of the things that surprised me since I came to the Gambia is how many Gambians are multilingual. I grew up in Sierra Leone. If you live in Freetown, you only speak Creole and English. That's it. And some people only Creole. And yet here, routinely, I'll hear somebody say, oh yes, I'll speak Mandinka, Wolof, and Fula, and so on. But now we're talking about it, Aliu's just given a kind of angle to it at university level. I'm saying maybe it should be introduced sooner.
Yes, absolutely. So can you imagine socially without having any of that's happening anyway, people learn all sorts of things. But remember, around independence, the talk of language, it has been a major issue.
All the time.
Absolutely. Only that we were reminded by philosophers and others said, look, be careful. What have you standardized? Do I have, for instance, here in Gambia, can I go and buy these dictionaries, and words, to know exactly how do we pronounce them, how do we spell them, the standardization. And then each culture, it must be carried by a literature. Where are the novels? You see, there's so much that we need to do for these languages to become national languages, as it were. How do I write in Mandinka or Wolof E equals to MC squared? I have to bring in science into these languages. So one can be realistic, set a proper aim, you begin where you can begin, and then who knows, in 50 years, 100 years' time, we might have those very things in our local languages.
And I was quite shocked when I discovered a couple of Fula brothers who only in the last 15 years have kind of standardized Fula in a written kind of alphabet and text that could be a standardized one that could be used everywhere in the last 15 years. And this is a language that has been spoken for centuries.
Even during the last Fulbe Africa, even at Q City, I saw someone who was also selling some books written in Fula. I was like, wow, it's interesting.
So this introduction, perhaps with these pioneering students, this is really what they're going to do.
Absolutely.
To set the base, as it were, for us to carry carry it,
Sure.
to much higher heights.
Yeah, let's hope so. And now on to our 7th, and we're still in the month of May, and this is the one we discussed kind of in passing earlier, and this was the scheme by the National Assembly members to award themselves this whopping loan, as everybody described it. Have a look.
When a motion for the allocation of the loan scheme was introduced by Yakumba Jete, a nominated National Assembly member, she had defended it, arguing that it was within their power to do so. And with a majority of votes in favour, it succeeded in having it inserted into the 2021 national budget. In a unanimous judgment by 5 justices of the Supreme Court, it was declared that the power to introduce or include a fresh budget line item on draft estimate of revenue and expenditure is exclusively reserved for the President. In a long statement delivered by Justice Jibril Samega Jane, the court concluded that the loan scheme was unlawfully and wrongfully included in the budget estimate.
The nominated National Assembly member who introduced it, Yakumba Jaite, as our colleague Troy said there, had argued, but the court rejected it in categorical terms, saying that that kind of amendment and addition to the budget could only be done by His Excellency the President.
Yeah, and then for some of the MPs, they disagreed. For them, they had the powers to scrutinize the budget, and they can add or reduce anything they want. And then for them, it was also a way of trying to, ensure that the Parliament is independent. I mean, some of them, they believe, they still have their own cars, they still have their homes and all that. But it was something that people had really condemned. I mean, not because of the Parliament was allocating itself this loan, but in the manner in which it was done, it was something that they really, totally against.
Yes,
and then for me, it was good that the courts were put to test once more.
That's right, and it was several times. It was one of several times, rather, that the courts actually proved their independent, minded spirit, and that was a perfect example of it.
Gambians couldn't believe it, because on the one hand, we were talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact on everything, every sector, devastating sectors like tourism and all the rest of it, and they had chosen that moment to give themselves 54 million. Let's say that could have waited a bit until we were slightly out of the woods. We have no idea how long it will take, but that could have waited. Perhaps there's a good argument for even us to uplift our National Assembly members. Well, there's a good argument, but when do you do it? It's a matter of timing.
The timing was
a lot of people were quite
and this was an instance of them not taking the public with them, really.
Yes.
I mean, the public were dead against it. So that was one. So that brings us to the end of May and takes us into June. And in June, we had one of these things where you had to read the statistics several times to actually believe your eyes and ears. At this time, we're talking about remittances that came into the Gambia through official sources only. Have a look.
At least 140,000 Gambians live outside their country. The financial contributions of these people to their families and their home economy in the form of remittances sent regularly is hugely significant. A FinScope survey in 2019 has found out that money sent home from family and friends is a vital source of income to an estimated 26% to 37% of households in the Gambia. Due to the impact remittances have on people's lives, international remittances are not only an important source of income for many families, but also an important source of foreign exchange in the Gambian economy, especially given it is an import-dependent country.
Remittances sent home. We seem to be defying everybody, the World Bank, the IMF, Mr. Mboj. Both of those august institutions had said that because of COVID-19, the fact that Gambians remitted from countries where they'd been sort of hard hit in the West, people had been laid off, that this would actually impact upon, and yet in end of 2020, $588 million, and already, we're not at the end of December yet, over 700 million.
Absolutely.
Quite remarkable.
And apparently the last time they checked,
dollars,
was,
by the way.
48% of GDP. That was quite
came from remittances.
But you know, facts are one thing, theories are quite another.
We
all know that this is how these things work, the hypothesis, the theories. They do generally get it right.
Well, I was going to say,
that.
what was interesting about the IMF figure was that in most countries they got it right.
They got it right.
But in the Gambia, so much so that Gambia made the front page as being one of the places where they got it badly wrong. Wow. And statistics which I shared just a few days ago, Gambia is in the top 10 in Africa. Out of 55 countries in Africa, Gambia is number 10 when it comes to remittances for the year which is just about to end, and that's quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that's why for me, this why, you know, those of us who are home-based, we should really respect our brothers and sisters in the diaspora.
Sure.
I mean, they are really doing great. I mean, that's why we even see now at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's this directorate responsible for the diaspora. I mean, just to ensure that, you know, they bridge that gap, you know, that link between the government and people living in the diaspora, because like Mr. Ade said, I mean, they are really contributing significantly to the socio-economic development of this country. I mean, you're talking about dollars here.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
It's quite a lot of money.
This is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the halfway point of this look back on the year 2021. And join us after the break for some more stories where we take you from July through to December. Don't go away. Join us after the break.
Now, with Aji Bank, you can make your vehicle number plate payments without any hassle. Walk into any of our bank branches or agencies located at Banjul, New Joswang, Karaba Avenue, Bakote, Tranquil Brusubi, Brikama, Basse, Farafenye, Numuyel or Garawal. Your number plate payments now made easy with Aji Bank. For more information, please call us on 422-8405 or 377-5811. Aji Bank, your investment partner.
I am the light goddess. Everything I touch turns into light. I am the light at the end of the tunnel, and my technology is the answer. I am the happiness in your life. I keep you connected, and I am Q-Power. I am Q-Cell. I am Sunibus. We innovate, others follow. Call 111 for more information.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching the Year in Review as we look back over some of the big stories from the year just ended, 2021. Of course, we look forward with some degree of enthusiasm and optimism to 2022. Now, in July, we had several things that happened, and one of the things that happened was in the world of sport. There was quite a shock in Gambian football. What am I talking about? Have a look.
From playing Nawetan in Brikama 9 years ago to deserved champions of the GFF First Division League. Goals from Patrick Silva and Ibu Sanyang gave Fortune a 2-1 victory against second-placed Walidan in a tense game on Thursday to confirm their status as winners of the coveted trophy. It was everything one could wish for in a top-of-the-table clash. It had skills, excitement, and was closely fought, as the first half ended goalless. The win over Walidan gave Fortune a 12 points lead over their opponents and meant they could not be caught.
It gave them a 12-point lead, and of course with the games to go, it meant, Ali, you and I, Mr. Mboj, we're all football fans. Yeah. It was quite exciting, and it wasn't one of the usual suspects that won. This time it was Fortune, quite unexpected.
quite unexpected. They came into the league, I mean, playing against top guns like Real de Banjul, Walidan, and Gambia Armed Forces, and they were able to win the league in a dramatic fashion for the first time. It was quite historic. I mean, it was one of the best seasons that we have seen, and having fortune, winning the league at the expense of Real de Banjul, that was quite
it was quite unbelievable. But Mr. Mboy, for me, what was exciting was the fact that it wasn't luck. They played some stylish, attacking football, and I was really impressed.
Yes, I just think everybody said we were fortunate.
Quite. But it was skill.
Yeah. Absolutely, no denying that. And you want our league to be more like perhaps the Premiership, maybe 4 or 5 teams can possibly win it.
Well, I likened it to Leicester winning the Premier League.
Absolutely, stuff like that.
A team which at the start of the season would not have been in the reckoning if you had said to somebody, choose the 4 or 5 teams that will win the league. In 2016, whatever it was, when Leicester won, nobody would have gone for them. Albeit in the season previous to that, they had gone 10 games undefeated to save themselves from relegation, and had turned around their season. But everybody thought, it was a one-off, and that's where it would end. And yet they went on to win the league with fortune. As I said, I don't think anybody would have reckoned that they would have won the league.
That's exactly it, and we hope that they're there to stay.
We hope so.
With the big boys, and they'll compete in the next few years. Maybe it might be a bit difficult, perhaps, to ask them to do it back to back.
It's always
difficult. But hopefully they will be, kicking it with the big boys.
Let us hope so. Let us hope so. And our next story in July, it could not be more different. We've kind of referenced it earlier, and this was in our 10th video. It's regarding the fact that Yankuba Toure finally had his day in court, and the court passed judgment. Have a look.
In criminal cases, the burden of proof rests on the shoulders of the prosecution. In this trial, the court agrees with the evidence, including that of its 9 witnesses and material ones presented by the prosecution, as facts to be considered for this judgment. During the trial, Toure had raised a defense of alibi, which is a matter for determination in today's verdict. But the judge explains why that defense fails and is ruled invalid. The legal defense of alibi means that one was not present at the time and place of the commission of a particular crime.
Once the immunity had been stripped away, Aliyu, Mr. Mboj, I think most of us felt that the evidence, such as it was pretty strong, and so it proved to be enough to convince the court to pass a sentence of death.
Yes, I mean, like you said, I mean, we've already, touched a bit about this story leading to the prosecution and subsequent sentencing to death by the judge. But I mean, for me, all these things could have been avoided. I mean, if Yankuba had heartily, cooperated with the TRRC to testify, but then what they tell is that no matter how long it takes, justice must be served. No matter how long. And then, if you look at, if you follow the TRRC, I mean, I remember interviewing the president and asked him what was his most memorable moment during the TRRC hearing, and he mentioned the issue of Usman Korosise, how he was killed. I mean, that was for him something that was quite unfortunate. And then guess what? The judgment was delivered 3 days after the interview with the president. I'm not saying that has nothing to do with the judgment, but it was something that for many people who were following TRRC, the killing of Usman Korosise was quite disgusting.
And Mr. Mboj, in passing judgment, when the sentence was read out, the judge said quite pointedly, you refused to cooperate. You mentioned certain people as alibis, and yet you didn't want them to come forward as witnesses if they were your alibi, which he thought was rather odd. And so essentially no surprise that the sentence was handed down.
Yes, he used the alibi card, and you're saying that that was all unnecessary. No, he made it quicker. He made it easier. Straight to the courts. Exactly for this one. What is it? At least one can get a kind of partial, as it were, closure from this, because you imagine that there are others mentioned.
Yes, indeed.
It's just the only one so far. Others mentioned. So what would happen with those? And then you think about, I just remember Kurosi's sister, the TRRC, the testimony. Also remember how emotional, tearful even the chairman became.
Quite. That was moving. I mean, people in the office were crying.
Absolutely, people were crying. So to my mind, he deserved. He got what he deserved. Really. So maybe he wouldn't be hanged because of
because we
maybe also there's a room he could appeal against the
well it's
possible?
Supreme Court. So there is that opportunity, but there's no there's no Privy Council anymore to appeal to.
Exactly.
So if it ends at the Supreme Court, that is it.
Exactly.
But not a laughing matter.
Exactly,
but essentially those are the options. And now a completely different story in July that involves us, Q Group. Because of all this talk about vaccine hesitancy, Q Group, we went on a kind of a vaccination drive, and all of us went out and got vaccinated. Aliyu, Mr. Mboj, all of us. And I'm pleased to say that people contacted me and said when they saw the story, it actually inspired them to say, yeah, actually maybe I should do it too. Yeah.
It was a good move, quite good leadership there by the chairman, Mohamed Jah, to lead in terms of ensuring that all the staff within the Q Group are vaccinated. I mean, to make sure they are all protected, and of course their families, because not only us we are vaccinated, so most of us came with our families to QCT, where we took the jab. So it was important, and I was even expecting all these institutions in the country will have followed suit, and then to try to encourage their staff, because you don't force them, but you just encourage them to take the jab, knowing the importance it is attached as far as this.
Mr. Mboj, I mean, one of the things that our chairman said, Mohamed Jah said, was that, look, my staff interact with customers and they're protecting themselves and they're protecting the customer by getting the jab, and that is true. It's not fluff or kind of made up stuff. It's a statement of fact.
Yes, and the facilitative aspect of it as well, because you heard certain people saying that I want to take the jab, well, where would I go? How can I get it? I've heard this, I heard that. So he arranged it. He made it much easier, and this was it. A lot of people should have taken a leave from his book to go and do it. And there was something else. I mean, some of us really we have a responsibility to encourage certain people, because here, even in the office, a few people were reluctant, but after you had a talk with them, they came with you. So this was our responsibility for some of us to talk to people and tell them, hey, look, this is safe, and have good arguments, and they would follow.
And so they did. Yeah, thanks for that. And something quite different. There had been rumors that the Olympic Games would be cancelled, postponed. They weren't. They went ahead, and to our delight, Jenna Bass ran, and she set a national record. And she didn't get a medal, but at least she was able to set a national record, and we were quite proud of her for that.
Well, like you said, we have always been proud of Jenna. I mean, that's Jenna for you. I mean, her determination to succeed has actually led her to where she is now. She's really sacrificed a lot. If you follow her journey from where she started to where she is now, it has not been an all smooth journey for her, just like any other person. But I mean, she is somebody that like Mr. Ade said, she deserves whatever she gets as far as sports is concerned.
And Mr. Mboj, we were quite hopeful going into the Olympic Games in terms of the 200 particularly, but the ones who ended up getting on the medal rostrum, they really, on the podium, they really raised their game and set unbelievable times.
Absolutely. And he also raised his game in the sense that he broke the national record. She didn't. So she also raised her game. It just happened that it just didn't happen for her this time round. That's all it is. There will be other opportunities and the inspiration to others. You know, all sorts of things will be tied around.
Exactly. And then for me, something that stood out for me was, you know, the way people were celebrating her achievements. It's like the whole country was behind her. People were doing fundraising. She came back, and then I think we have a story on that. She came back, they met the president, and there was that huge, reward and all those things. For me, it was quite emotional. I mean, knowing her journey, she has really come far, and then having the whole country united in supporting her, that was something that was really quite...
and it was beautiful because, yes, she didn't come back with the medal, but we realized that she had given everything as much as she could. And, you know, it was not to be this time, but we hope there'll be a next time and that she'll come back with some color of medal. Thanks again for that. Now, in July, the cynics had their field day. Mr. Mboj, the TRRC postponed its report in July, and some people said it's never going to happen. But of course, subsequently, we know what happened. But in July, there was quite a kind of fevered discussion about, oh my God, this is all, you know, skullduggery. And I said that, you know, somebody who'd followed the one in South Africa, followed the one in Sierra Leone from day one to the last day, I knew how complex these things could be. And so, you know, I was aware that it was not going to be easy and it was not going to be quick. And so it proved to be.
Oh, absolutely. And that was what we said. I mean, you know, when these things happen, people just sort of reach for the skeptical view immediately, as it were. It's just the nature of social media now. But we thought that there was really nothing in what they had done until then for us to suggest anything that was improper. As it were. It was just a matter of them needed to take their time because the volumes, what, 16, 17 volumes?
Well, that's right.
Something like that. And they had brought, what, up to 14 or something like that. The government said, nope, not yet, complete it all. And then we said that maybe perhaps government was even a bit unfair. Because we remember in South Africa that wasn't happened. You know, the whole thing started in 95. The final report was submitted
in
that's
1998.
And they submitted them in installments, not all at once. So that was the thing. But in the end, submitted all.
I think for me, what we also saw, I mean, at the initial point when it was postponed, some people were trying to politicize it because election was coming. Some people were saying, okay, maybe the president is not keen on receiving the report. I mean, we later had the TRRC saying, okay, they are not ready with the whole report because they wanted to submit only the recommendations. But then the minister was saying, no, you have to bring the whole report, everything, the findings and recommendations. But then the important thing is that finally it has been submitted, and then the outcome is made public now.
Yeah, indeed. And that takes us on to August, and of course the big moment, our 11th video, the AFCON draw. Was it going to be kind to Gambia? Have a look and you decide.
At the end of the night, Scorpions fans had looked forward to Gambia making their first finals appearance, found themselves drawn with familiar opponents and near neighbors Mauritania, making their second appearance, fellow West Africans Mali, who are appearing in the finals for the 12th time, finishing as runners-up in 1972, and group top seed Tunisia. The Tunisians will be making their 20th finals appearance and were winners in 2004. The Scorpions will open their Group F campaign against Mauritania in Limbe before facing Mali and Tunisia in Limbe.
Pure guesswork here, so we won't spend too much time on it. But a tough group or not?
Yeah, for me it's not
Tunisia,
as tough.
Mali.
Exactly, Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania. I mean, not a tough group. I mean, for Gambia, I mean,
it's not a group of death.
Exactly. But like Mr. Mohi said, nobody will die. It's a group of death. But I mean, it's not really a tough group. I mean, having Mali, Mauritania, and Tunisia, the Gambia had a chance of really making it, to the second stage.
Mr. Mboj, we stand a chance?
Yeah, I mean, preparation, the right psychological outfit, frame of mind. So who knows? I mean, earlier on you mentioned the two who went for the
small-
first
so-called
time,
small football nations,
and
yeah.
got to the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
At least.
Sure. So yeah, let's hope. And,
Yeah,
and
because
let's-
I think
let's dream big.
if there's any family unfamiliar opponent, perhaps it will be Mali. But we've
Yeah.
played Mauritania in the past. We played
Played
Tunisia in the past. So
although
I think even though maybe they have changed
Yeah,
as time
sure.
goes on, and
As-
the players
as-
have
as
changed
have
all
we.
the tactics and
Yeah.
everything. But
Yeah.
really, the Scorpions have a chance.
Yeah. So let's hope so. And another big thing, of course, was when the Olympians met the president, and also some of the Olympians faced the media. They came back, and as we said, we were quite thrilled to have them back, and they seemed really pleased with the reception that they got, both from the president and when they faced the media.
Yes, they felt appreciated. I think that's what they need from us. They're certainly not going to get that much money when you compare to other athletes elsewhere or the Olympians. Even here, Gina Bass, we used to say, "What the poor Olympian."
Well, that's right.
that sort of thing. So it matters that we show appreciation from the government and even civil society, NGOs, businesses could have, just cobbled up something together, said, hey, look, our appreciation and stuff like that. Yeah. So it will matter what we do.
Yeah, cool. But good for that. And now this takes us into September. And September, of course, is the kind of traditional time for schools to reopen. But this time it wasn't just any kind of reopening. They'd been closed for a long time because of COVID. And there was excitement. Have a look.
Today, I came to this school and then I met my students back. They are all in good health and in good shape. And I am also wishing them for this new academic year, I'm wishing them good luck. And whatever they are learning, that may God Almighty help them and open their mind and increase more wisdom and knowledge to them.
Nene Ture, a grade 3 student, expressed delight to be in school again.
Today I am very happy for coming to the school. I'm in grade 3.
We heard there from a teacher and a pupil about their excitedness about getting back to school. Aliu, pupils were excited, parents were excited because I think they were getting rather end of their tether with their children being home for so long.
Yeah, I think for me, it was good that schools were resuming. Students were having that physical interaction with their classmates, with their schoolmates and teachers.
Sure.
Which is for some is more effective. The online was good because of the pandemic, but then most of the online classes were on TV. Others were following on radio. Perhaps what you try to explain on TV, somebody who is following on radio wouldn't really understand what you are trying to explain. And it was good that they returned to school to have that physical interaction. It gets more effective.
Samboj, as I said there, we saw and heard from a teacher who was quite excited, saying, I'm pleased that all my pupils have come back and they're all healthy. But as I said, also parents were kind of really reaching the end of their tether because some of them just weren't good at teaching their children at home. And as you rightly said, because we weren't used to the kind of online learning that a lot of the rest of the world takes for granted, there were lots of imperfections, let me put it that way, and so it was good that they could go back to the kind of physical space of being in a class.
Well, absolutely. This whole situation, the whole world, maybe those who sort of slightly just got away with it, those from whose parents are educated, they've got all the facilities at home, they can help you study. So these are the people really who gained in many ways. So absolutely fantastic that they went back. Of course, everybody was not sure about the COVID-19, how it would affect kids. But afterwards, we realized that it wasn't as severe with kids. So you even had certain commentators saying that the fact that we've closed all these schools and we know that the COVID-19 is not that severe on kids, are we sacrificing them in some ways? You had people talking, saying that.
We did hear that.
So it was a good thing.
So it's great to be back at school. Gosh, who thought we'd hear that said? But still in September, very often, Gambian, we kind of look down on our achievements, but this time it was a global recognition for the Gambia. Have a look at this.
A recent report by the Climate Action Tracker, an environmental watchdog that assesses whether nations' environmental plans are sufficient, insufficient, or almost insufficient based on mitigation targets, policies, actions, and climate actions, revealed that globally, Only the Gambia's plans are compatible with the Paris Agreement, a binding international treaty on climate change. Alpha A.K. Jallo, the Director of Climate Change Secretariat at the Ministry of Environment, said despite the dire warning that the world risks soon hitting 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise in global warming by the 2030s, new analysis has found that none of the world's major economies have sufficient plans to combat climate change.
I mean, we talked about Myanmar and we said Little Gambia.
Yeah.
I mean, Paris Agreement, who would have believed that Little Gambia, would be the
Only
country that was compliant with certain aspects of the Paris Climate Agreement. Aliu, shock to you?
Yeah, I mean,
it was to me. I have to be
honest. I was shocked. I mean, I was like, wow, are they serious? Do they mean Gambia or Zambia? I'm confused.
The Gambia.
It's good. I mean, to have the Gambia, being recognized at that global stage for the efforts we are doing in trying to, be outstanding, and it is something that even the developed countries, can also learn from us.
Mr. Mboj, a moment to be proud, surely, as a Gambian.
Well, yes. How much do we contribute? We really want big powers.
Well, this is true. This is true. And for me, the pride was that we were kind of shaming the big powers.
Yeah, exactly.
To say, Little Gambia can do its little bit. You are the ones who are really the polluters. You really need to do your bit as well. I don't think they will be, but
they don't mind being shamed.
They don't care, do they?
They don't care.
They don't care.
Being shamed.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the overall fear right now, because most of our countries, be Gambia, Africa, we depend on some of these international agencies for energy and all sorts of things. And for us, we also know that we really depend on fossil fuels for a while, to make that turnaround. So, but now they will refuse to finance it.
Sure.
So where would it go? Can we really lead some kind of green revolution? I'm not saying that we can't, you know what I mean? Only that it will take so much. We all know that we're not very good with research. We don't do that. Not that we are stupid, it's just that infrastructurally we've not primed ourselves, as it were, to be doing this research and that sort of thing. So that's really the fear now.
Sure. Thanks for that. Now, if anybody is just tuned in and you're thinking, what's going on? Well, we're trying to take you in a kind of rush through some of the big stories that have kind of ticked us, and got us on the edge of our seats, really, in the newsroom, in the QTV newsroom this year. And so we're on to, that was the end of September, and we're into October. Now, the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry announced quite a significant, they made quite a significant announcement right at the beginning of October. Have a look.
An advisory board, which was the dictate of our members during the AGM. But more importantly than that is to recognize the services over the years that they have done for GCCI. This organization was founded in 1965, and we have a lot to learn, not only from how GCCI has maintained its relevance to both the business community and to the society over this long period of time.
Idris Amas Job, we heard there. Mr. Mboj, it seemed a bit of a no-brainer that, you had all these people with experience. The GCCI formed in 1965, and yet they'd never kind of retained them in a kind of advisory role. When their time ended, they left. And yet now they're thinking, well, actually, institutional memory is being lost if we don't retain you in some role, and that's exactly what they've done.
Absolutely, it's a fantastic idea. I wish that this whole place,
across
all the
institutions
will have stuff like that. Because with us, we know that during the 22 years, at some point we lost our way, and perhaps you had certain people that shouldn't have been there, and then here our inheritance is sort of institutions that really are not performing well. So going back to the old guard, people who have done it for maybe 30, 40 years, elsewhere, then to come and help be this body, absolutely.
Quite,
for me, it's a good idea. You talk about the issue of institutional memory. I mean, these are people who were there, who have served in changing the GCCI, and it's always good to go back to them and try to tap from what they have left behind and their experience. And you can always only do that if you have them in a setup like this, advisory board. It's important, and I think they will try to maintain them, and those who have also been hired to be part of this advisory board will also give their honest advise as board members to ensure that they're able to improve the work of the GCCI, because the GCCI really plays a very crucial role as far as the private sector in this country.
Sure, and just to take one more story in October before we jump into November, December, foundation for the 50-kilometer road project. There was a lot of excitement around this. Aliu, you were there and you saw and felt the excitement firsthand. How was it?
Yes, I mean, it was a quite historic occasion, not only for the president, but even the people in the urban areas, because it's important that, I mean, we've always complained about the issue of traffic. I mean, you drive every day to come to work.
I complain every day.
The issue of the traffic congestion is something that people have really complained, and then having these roads, I mean, built is really going to help in time to decongest, I mean, the main highways that we use, and we are hopeful that when completed, it's really going to fix that problem. So for me, it's a quite huge project and long overdue one.
Mr. Mboj, we're talking about the urban ones rather than the ones in the rural areas, and I am one quite use the word victim. Well, certainly the house where I live, the whole half of the garden has been demolished because it's encroaching onto what is going to be part of the widening of the road. And to give him his due, the landlord accepts that this is progress, and this is something that there are sacrifices have to be made by many people.
Yes, there's always a price to pay when we talk about progress.
Every development comes with
absolutely that sort of thing. And yes, and the whole urban sort of this parts of the urban landscape will have this facelift.
Indeed.
For a long time, perhaps we're getting so many cars, but the road infrastructure was not developing in tandem. And they've all sort of dilapidated and small, and they really not fit for purpose
anymore.
So it will make a huge difference, even though you hear some people, sort of the cynics, saying that, it wouldn't be ready before the OIC and all the rest of it. But we've also seen cynics in the past predicting all sorts of things that never came to be.
This is true. This is true. Thank you for that. And that brings us to the end of October and now into November. And of course, what everybody had been waiting for was the presidential election and the nominations. Nominations were on board for the presidential elections, and here's what happened, or here's some of what happened. Have a look.
The first candidate to present was Esambai Fall. To many in and out of the Gambia, as lead counsel on the not long completed Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission TRRC, he is very much the face of the Truth Commission. He had a long and distinguished legal career even before the TRRC appointment. Today, he started by trying to help the IEC by offering to present his documents as they were listed in the checklist. He was stopped shortly after presenting, as he said, copies of my expired and my current Gambia passports. In conversation, he explained his symbol as a boat as "We are one Gambia, a united people with one destiny." As has become almost the norm, we could hear the Deputy IEC Chairman utter the now familiar words. You have until 4 p.m. on Friday to bring the document.
There you heard just a snippet there. Now, we were a bit worried because we felt that the whole thing with the presidential nominations, Mr. Mboj, at one time we thought we were going to have 20-something candidates. 26. Luckily we didn't, but that was quite a sort of dramatic nomination process and quite colorful in the end.
Yeah, so in the end, we whittled down to 6.
Yeah, indeed.
Which was a more sober number to deal with. But in a sense, we also suspected that might be the case. During our weekend review analysis, we thought that generally they tend to be whittled down come the day.
That was what happened. And so it proved to be, Ali.
Indeed, it proved to be, like you said, 26 had actually anticipated the contest, but after going through the procedure and then the IEC doing their homework, trying to scrutinize all the documents that were submitted, they found out some of them haven't met all the requirements, and because of that, we had 6 that actually contested the election. It was quite interesting. I mean, it shows that things have changed. People are now getting interested in running the affairs of this country, and for the first time, we have 26 aspiring candidates.
Luckily, they were whittled down.
Exactly.
And also, of course, very quickly, TRRC finally presented its report, 25th of November, to the President, which people thought would never happen. And yet, on 25th of November, they did exactly that.
Yes, like we had discussed earlier. I mean, it was postponed because the report wasn't ready, and finally, I mean, they submitted the report. I mean, you know, wrapping up their mandate after what has been over 2 years of public hearings, open and closed door hearings, and they have finally submitted their reports, which is the most important thing. And now the question now is what next? I mean, what next?
The white paper.
The white paper. Yeah. And on to our next video. The elections came, they went, and we heard that they were free and they were fair. Have a look.
In the vast majority of polling stations observed, persons with disabilities at 94%, the elderly at 98%, pregnant women, nursing mothers at 99%, and sick persons at 96% were given priority to vote before others. In 98% of polling stations observed, the voting compartment was set up in a manner that allows voters to mark their ballots in secret. In 96% of polling stations observed, the ballot drums were well placed so that the voters could easily see the color, photos, and writing on the ballot drums.
Aliu, you headed the broadcast over those rather long times. We don't have much time left, but as the results came in, we knew that there was one inevitable result, and so it proved to be. Yeah, exactly. I remember that particular day we were having our live broadcast, announcing the results, and then this press release came in, and where we have this, the CSOs and other observer missions coming to issue a statement as to the way the elections was conducted. I mean, trying to confirm that it was free, fair, and transparent, and which is good for any country, because that's what people want to see. That's why you have the observer mission. And then I think for the first time, having around 3 former presidents all coming to head observer mission in the country was quite historic for this country. Sure. Samboch, I mean, for you, free, fair, and quite exciting on the night.
Absolutely.
More than the night.
Big time. And just very quickly, when somebody came to me and said to me, what do you think of UDP's petition? I said, look, if I were a stranger, not from Gambia, came over, and I look at all these observation missions, what they've said, be it international, Gambian, or whatever, I said, well, possibly, on the balance of probability, they're right. There
you are. Exactly. Thanks for that. I think that rather nails it. And then our final video. Lots and lots of laws are on our statute books that have no right being there. Have a look.
For example, in Gambia's criminal code, people can be arrested, fined, or jailed for 2 years, or both, for offences such as being a rogue, vagabond, idle and disorderly persons, defamation of foreign princes, pretending to exercise witchcraft or tell fortunes, failure to pay debts, or using abusive or insulting language to a public health officer, etc. Ironically, the British, who bequeathed us these laws, have expunged all of them from their statute books.
And there you have it, Aliu. Lots of these laws have no right being there. They're discriminatory, they're petty, talking about insulting foreign princes and so on. It's taking us forever to get rid of them. We don't have much time left, but just a final word or two. Yeah, I think for me what we need is just the reforms. I mean, we hope some of the reforms that have been initiated will be followed, and we have them in place. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Mboj, for you?
I mean, can you imagine the crimes, the offences? Rogue, vagabond. And you wonder, why have they been in their books for so long?
Why have they not been kicked out before? And if I could just say, finally, Halifa Sallah is leaving the political front stage. A word from you, and then a word from Aliu, and then we can close.
Oh, extraordinary man. I mean, he's been an educator. He's been this model, this iconic human being that's been responsible for our political education. Most of us, particularly in our 50s possibly, he's been our guru.
Mr.
For me, quite incredible man, Halifa Sallah. For most of us who have been covering the parliament, we've been following him, and we know how instrumental he is at the parliament, and knowing the fact this is last term in Parliament. I mean, we wish them all the best. And then for the country, it's been a quite interesting year, 2021 election year, and eventually the president is being re-elected. And you know, like he has always said during his campaign, I mean, he's going to be the president for all. And then I think what is important now is to, you know, for everybody to put aside their differences and come together and work in the interest of this country. Yes, true, you know, you might have the president up there, but at the end of the day, it is the people who makes it work, and we hope, you know, everybody will come on board to support him to ensure that, you know, we get to where we want to be as a country.
Aliu, thank you for that, and I'd just like to say goodbye from you. And Mr. Mboj, gentlemen, thank you, and thank you for interjections. And for those who've been watching, I'm sure we've probably missed some of your favorite stories, but we had over nearly 600 stories that we cover. We couldn't cover all of them. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.